When I tell you that my period after coming off of birth control was hell, welcome back. Let's have a chit chat. This one's for the girls, for the menstruators. Let's talk birth control. I want to talk all about the physical, the emotional, the mental, what I've noticed since being off birth control, and it's been just about 2 years now. When I tell you, I used to have the worst periods prior to birth control. The worst. I'm talking throwing up, coming out both ends, back pain, like serious back pain, cramps that I was prescribed medication for, lethargic, dizziness, like I was a hot mess. Prior to being off birth control, every single time I would get my period, I would have to take the day off of school. This was like during high school at that point, even into my first couple years out of high school, I would take off work. Like I just was not functional. It just didn't happen. Like I would have like cold sweats. It was bad, very bad. And immediately what I noticed being on birth control was my periods were like a breeze compared to pre-birth control periods. My skin, Jeff's kiss, great. I loved it. I didn't notice for myself any crazy hormonal changes while I was on birth control at the time. I was on and off birth control from the age of 19 up until almost 2 years ago, and I'll be 29 this year. So I was on birth control for close to a decade on and off, and I cycled through a few different ones, primarily the pill, and then I also tried the NuvaRing. When I would get off of birth control, and especially on the NuvaRing, my skin was bad. My skin was just horrible. Every single time I got off of it, I was like, this is not worth it. My periods suck, my skin is bad, let me hop right back on birth control. And then about almost 2 years ago, I decided, okay, you know what? I've been on birth control for such a long time. I just want to see what happens if I just kind of stick it out. I was going through a phase of not really wanting to put hormones like that into my body for such a long time. My period regulated itself quite easily after I stopped birth control. It did take a few months, and I was tracking it with the Flow app as well. But when I tell you that my period after coming off of birth control was hell, let me give you a story. I decided to go hang out with my friend one day. I was supposed to get my period that day. While I was out with her, we went for a walk, went to a coffee shop, and I started feeling the cramps, all of that kind of stuff. I was like, ooh, yeah, like I was prepared for this, brought a tampon with me, all of that kind of stuff. I was like, I definitely have my period. So went to the bathroom, did my thing, whatever. Got a coffee, but I noticed that I just like was not feeling well. It was decently hot, but not crazy hot where you're gonna get heat stroke or anything like that. And as we were walking, I was just sweating. Like my hair was getting wet, my clothes were getting wet. I could barely even focus on what she was saying. Like it was bad. And like I felt like I could barely even walk. Eventually, we finally made it to her house, which felt like hours after we were walking. I went straight to the bathroom, threw up literally everything that was in my body. Again, both ends, and then eventually I just drove back home. I just passed out, and by passed out I mean slept. I went to sleep for hours, and I was just feeling nauseous, so tired, like could not function. And that was how like the first day of my period was for a good, I would say like 6-7 months. After those 6 or 7 months, my period was still quite uncomfortable and I got crazy cramps still, but it probably wasn't until maybe like 3 or 4 months ago where everything has kind of regulated itself. So I still get cramps, I still get back pain, but it's not debilitating. I don't have to take the day off of work. I don't feel like I'm going to pass away or anything like that. What I will say is that it was really hard trying to stick out that period, especially that 6 or 7 months where every single month my period was like quite literally debilitating. But after sticking it through for that long, now my period feels so much better and I can kind of live my everyday life. I take care of myself a lot more during that time, and I'm just a lot more gentle with myself and whatever else. But honestly, physically, those are the largest impacts that I've seen. On a mental and emotional level, after I got off of birth control, I didn't really realize how disconnected I was. And I don't know if that's other people's experience, but I noticed after I came off of birth control, I was so much more what felt like connected to myself and so much more just kind of like emotional. And a lot of people might see that as a bad thing, but I don't, honestly. I feel a lot deeper. I just am so much more connected to the people around me, like my environment, my experiences, and that's something that I really love. And I've thought about going back on birth control before, but I don't want to compromise my emotional health in any way to make myself feel blunted or, you know, on the other side of the spectrum, feel even more than I currently am. I think that I probably didn't realize the shift in my emotional health, especially at age 19, because I wasn't really connected to myself back then anyways. So I think the impact on my mental health, I wouldn't have really noticed very much unless it was something that was super debilitating. From a skin perspective, I did notice after I went off of birth control, my skin took a turn for the worse. And granted, my breakouts might be considered on the more mild side, but after I got off of birth control, I definitely noticed a lot more like pimples popping up super frequently, which was something that was frustrating. Now I'll say that, again, my hormones have kind of leveled out, and I noticed that I do still get pimples, but it's mostly the week before I get my period, and it's always in the same kind of area. It's always like around this area, and they do kind of leave scarring, which is a bit annoying, but other than that, it's something that I can kind of deal with, so it's nothing crazy huge. Whereas before, anytime I would take a break from birth control, it was like large, like it was cystic, it would hurt, it was big, there was a lot of them, and just wasn't for me. So if you are someone who is on birth control or considering going off of birth control, use your own best judgment. I feel like for me, I would prefer to stay off of birth control for as long as I possibly can. I just use the Flow app in order to track my cycle and everything, and because I've been tracking it for almost 2 years now, it's super accurate down to the day. So I hope that is helpful for anybody who's wondering the same things, who's maybe going through the same experience. If you have any questions, comments, reflections, had similar experiences, drop them in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.